Good morning and welcome to the workshop. I'm an artist and woodworker. I make, among other things, abstract relief sculptures out of wood. And this morning my table saw's not working. That's not ideal. I think it's just a switch, so I've ordered a new one. In the meantime, there's plenty to get on with. This is the last piece I made. I tried to do a little experiment with making an abstract piece that was adjustable. Each piece can be removed, rotated, shifted around, and each of these carved wooden blocks is held in place by these little magnets. I really like how this turned out. I'm going to try and make something similar but on a larger scale without using the magnets, which, to be quite honest, not quite strong enough. That was quite a complicated build. So the plan is to make this piece out of multiple small rectangular segments, each with 3 inlaid strips of wood across them at different angles. I'm going to be using oak and walnut, and they will hang on a frame or a rail system, which is going to cut a little groove in the back. And here they all are. I did manage to get them all cut before the table saw died, and just over 140 in total, which means I had to sand each and every one of those 140 sides, and this was the first step in a long series of repetitious processes. It's all very quick and easy when you do a sketch, but coming to make something on this scale, a large part of the job is just repetition. A couple of days later and a new switch arrived in the post. My fingers crossed that was the problem solved, and we're back in business. And so it's on to the next step, which is cutting the grooves in the back of each of these pieces with a grooving blade on the table saw, using a little sled here with a stop block to ensure that each groove is in place. And of course, the grooving blade I have was fractionally too narrow for the rail I want to place these on. So after that first pass, I had to shift that stop block maybe just 2-3 millimeters to the right, and then cut them all again. And so on to the next step over at the miter saw. I'm cutting grooves in the faces of each one that will receive the inlaid strips of wood later on. I'm cutting the outer grooves first, at angles, alternate angles on each one, moving the arm of the miter saw in between each cut. Once those angle grooves were cut, I switched to a thicker blade in the saw and moved them back through, cutting the central line. Just as I finished those up, the postman delivered me a nice big box. What did you really want in 1991? I was 13, and I really wanted an expensive American mountain bike. So when this came up on eBay, I thought I'd treat myself. Outrageous fluorescent yellow, green and orange. Totally disgusting and amazing at the same time. That's a project for another day. In the meantime, let's get back to work. Back at the table saw, I cut a bunch of thin strips These are the walnut ones. Also cut oak and a few maple ones, which are going to make up the inlay pieces of the work. I'm just trimming these to length. Now this is where the fun really starts. Gluing each of these little inlays into place. I knew it was going to be time consuming, gently dabbing a little piece of glue. I'm using Type Bond thick set glue and fastening these in place. I didn't quite realise was that nearly every one of these little oak pieces that I cut was slightly too thick, so I ended up having to sand down each one of these very thin little pieces of oak, which are very hard to hold in your hand, to be able to fit them in the slots, which took a long time and resulted in me sanding pretty much most of the skin off my thumb. Bramble doesn't always like to hang out in the workshop. It can be a bit loud in here for a dog, with the saws and banging and whatnot. But this is a quiet job, steady job, so she came and hung out for a while. She's always happy if there's a Kong full of peanut butter. It's nice to have a fuzzy friend around. So after many hours work, inserting all these inlays and gluing them in place, and then sanding down each individual block, I was ready to put some nice oily finish on there. This is always a nice moment in any project, whether it's a piece of artwork or a picture frame or a piece of furniture. This oily finish really makes the grain sing. You just wipe it on a nice thick layer using this little scouring pad and leave it to soak in. Come back later and wipe off the excess. Postman arrived and offered me a break from all that sanding. A used art book. Always nice to get something in the post. And this one should serve as some really nice inspiration for some of the pieces I've got coming up. Anni Albers. Absolutely gorgeous stuff. She was a weaver and a fabric designer, but really she's an abstract artist. Interested in lots of the same things that I am. Texture and repetition. And this is incredibly beautiful. I'm going to spend a lot of time with this and get some good inspiration from it. It's nice to buy used books. This one feels like it's never even been opened. It's really beautiful. Once these pieces are all dry, I can move them over to one side so that I can finish working on the display rack that they're going to hang on, which I'll have to build a frame for as well later on. So I built this backer display rack thing out of plywood with some little MDF shims under each of these strips to give them, I think it's a 10-degree angle, and the segmented pieces will sit on these rails. It'll help from gravity and hopefully stay in place. So time to make the frame. Unfortunately, when I was looking through my stock of oak, the only piece I had long enough for the long sides of this frame would have to come out of this massive rough sawn piece of oak that I'd been saving for a piece of furniture or something different. But it's all I had, so it had to come out of here. Because this is a rough sawn board, the two faces aren't parallel with each other, they're not flat, there's rough spots, the sides aren't 90 degrees. So after I cut this down, I run it through the planer, jointed it on one side, planed it on the other, trimmed the edges, and then it was coplanar and 90 degrees on both sides. Once the board was milled down, I cut it into 5cm strips, and I was just about able to get all four sides of the frame out of this board. Then I cut a rabbet in each of the four sides, this little groove here, and that's where the plywood frame will sit. Cut the mitered corners over at the chop saw, made sure I got all my measurements correct, the angles right, and got it glued up and clamped up and ready to cut for splines. Once the glue was dry on the frame, I was able to take it over to the table saw, and using this spline jig, cut some nice grooves across at 45 degrees across the corners, and I'm putting some walnut splines in. It'll be a nice contrast with the oak. Just a little bit of glue, stick them in there, and it doesn't take too long to dry. This has been a very machine-heavy piece of work. Not a lot of hand tools used in this make, which is a little unfortunate. So let's take a little moment to give hand tool wall a little bit of love, maybe pick something out and take a closer look. Okay, you're staring down the barrel of a Stanley Bailey No. 3 smoothing plane, manufactured somewhere in the 1940s. With a new Veritas piece of steel in there, very sharp. It was in pretty rough condition when I found it, but I cleaned it all up, flattened it out, and I should use it more. And once the glue was dry on the splines, I trimmed them off, cleaned them up with a chisel, and sanded the frame down. Sanded it down to 220 grit, made sure there was no sharp edges, and then it was ready to put some finish on. And I used the same finish here as I did on the segment pieces. Really makes this grain sing. And that's pretty much it. More or less just a case of assembling things now. I was a little worried that this might not actually fit, but I managed to get my measurements just right and it slotted in real nice. So once that was screwed in place, we're ready to put it on a wall and see how it looks. Thanks for watching. Maybe I'll see you next time. Goodbye.